Welcome back, you guys. I'm Tassie, and today on my Ghost Update vlogs, I'm going to be talking about gods. I had a lot of questions come through, so we're going to touch base this video on the gods, and then we'll move on to questions next week. I don't think I'm going to have time to do another video this week. We'll see. We'll see. All right, now before we can get into the whole ordeal with gods, I feel like I need to touch base on two specific individuals because I've been asked about them quite recently and I've never touched base on them before, but now we're going into the whole god world. So I will touch base on this. I have been asked about Shi. And for anybody who does not know Shi, there is a lot of lore and legends and myths about this individual, and a lot of people refer to him as the original Hmong shaman. Now, I don't know if there's any text on him, but she's kind of like this mythical or legendary person that a lot of Hmong families would kind of reference. I actually never heard of Shi growing up. Granted, I went to church, but I actually never heard of him until I was much older, and that's when I first heard about him. Now, Shi, in general, the story goes, and this is like a watered down version from what I've heard in passing, bits and pieces, and everybody has a different version. But Shi is said that he was an amazing shaman, and this is where it gets kind of murky. He had a son, but he died. And so the people fed him, like the village people fed him to ghosts or something. And then Shi came back to his village one day and asked where his son was. I feel so stupid repeating this story because I know it's so wrong. So he came back and people told him what happened. And then he demanded to see the bones of his sons. And then he did magic and his son came back to life. And then somebody else in the village came and asked about his own son getting the same kind of thing done to his son who passed away too. And then Shi felt guilty because he couldn't help that guy because that guy didn't have the bones of his son. So he couldn't bring his son back to life. But then he had his own son. So then he went back to the spirit world and he threw his tools around the world. You see how this story is going? And then people who pick up his tools are supposed to be like his students, or they end up getting the gifts of Shi and they become shamans. So that is the story of Shi. Okay. All right. So just to clarify a few things with that ridiculous story. So a lot of people don't know this, but Shi is actually not the first Hmong shaman. According to my knowledge and my guides and what I know about the spirit world, Shi actually is not. Shi is actually Zizheng Zizong. Now, you guys have heard me reference Zizheng Zizong. Most of the times I just say it's Zizheng, which is just the short version of it. That is the demon killing types of spirits and power and ability. The other one is Ting Sha Neng Shao. That is more of along the lines of flowers, clairvoyance, Buddhas, and stuff like that. Don't misconstrue whenever I say Buddha. We are not talking about Buddha, like the chubby golden character totally rubbing his head. That is not who we are referring to. So they're essentially kind of like monks, basically, but they're not Buddha. Because for Hmong shamanism in particular, we actually have a lot of lineages that ban Buddha statues because we also do not have statues of our spirit guides. Just saying. So, if you are a person who likes Buddha statues and you are a shaman, maybe your guides are okay with it, but it's actually most of the times not allowed. So then who is the original shaman, Tassie? And who is this other individual? This is going to be, I think in text, his name is Jiyu, but I actually pronounce him as Juyi. And Juyi, to me, is, again, this person in text and history. Jiyu? Anyways, I can't say his name naturally because this, when I say Juyi, that's actually what my spirit guides are saying that his name is. So, anyways, Juyi is actually he was kind of like what people would call the original king or emperor or leader of Hmong people. And if you read him up in history, he is actually deemed as the god of war. And the Chinese, they actually have shrines in a temple and all that stuff that they actually pray and worship to him, especially if they're about to go to war. So he is also found in some Korean text as well. And Koreans also have shamans. I'm just saying. So, anyways, to me, Juyi, he is actually the original Hmong shaman. And he is known to be like the first of our leaders and everything like that. He is depicted in history as not a good person. So, kind of like a tyrant, basically. But he was undefeatable. And it actually took two emperors putting their forces together to actually defeat him. Now, historically, he is known to have magical powers. He could control elements and everything like that. So, to me, Juyi, he is the original one. And if you guys are Hmong and you know the word Juyi, Juyi is also what we would say and define it as like idea, or like it's actually a Chinese word. So when people say 跟我注意, like that means you have, normally it's used in like a bad context. Like, oh, 跟我注意不要, and then bam, you get hit, right, by your parents. So normally that's kind of like what that word is as well. But anyways, that is what I call him. So now we're going to move into the whole God context and everything. All right, so I mentioned in my last video about the dragons and getting to know them and understanding them. I am a reincarnation of a god. Now, you guys already know this, especially from my demeanor in my other videos. I don't like to talk about people's levels and if you are a reincarnation of a god, because I'm pretty realistic about it. It doesn't matter. In this lifetime, it does not matter. I still got bills to pay, okay? I still gotta go to work. So it doesn't matter in this lifetime. Now, granted, having the knowledge and knowing gods and all that stuff, it's beneficial in a spiritual aspect, especially if you're a shaman or you're somebody who has spiritual abilities, supernatural abilities, and of course, when you pass on. So that knowledge is important in that aspect, but, I still need me a sugar daddy, so I'm just saying. But I definitely wanted to mention it because to some individuals, it's very important to them. Very important to them if they are a reincarnation of a god. So let's get into this so you guys can understand. So I mentioned before, Hmong people believe in multiple gods and deities. It's like Greek mythology, basically. You're going to have Zeus and Hera, and then they're going to have children, and then they're going to have children, and it keeps going on, okay? So I was asked basically, what do they look like? And I just want to let you guys know, gods can change their form. Typically, they're going to change their form into something familiar to the individual. The first time I saw a god who was actually my father, I thought he was Asian. I genuinely thought he was Asian. He's actually not. But I was very afraid when I first saw him because I didn't understand what was going on. All right, so they're not going to be like really, really old looking in general. Some of them are, but they don't see time and their appearance the way we do. The easiest way to kind of explain it is they're kind of alien-like. They do look, their true form though, they look like they're a mixed race. And they're not like Indian, or they're not like Southeast Asian, or they're not European, or they're not even black, you guys. They look like a mixed race though. But they have a light that comes out of them. So because like you may have heard in past, from somewhere, TV maybe, that there's like a shining light around them. It's actually something from inside of them that actually comes out. And they actually will have a lot of clothes, but it depends. It depends on that god's affinity, whatever god they are of. They will wear different looking clothes. Some of them will look like armor. Now, just to be clear, my father, he is actually the God. Whatever you want to call it. Like, okay, so for among people, how we believe it, there's four corners of the earth, and there is a main God of all of heaven. That is my father. And the first time I was brought to him, I didn't know what was going on. This is when I had first started to become a shaman. I had a shrine. I was like on my first level. But my spirit guides brought me to this place. It was far away. They brought me to this place, and then they left me. And it was just the guides that I'm born with. I have two of them. Some people only have one, some will have two. So I had two of them, and they walked me into this room, and from a distance, I saw a man. And I didn't know, like, what I was doing. Is he a spirit guide I'm supposed to pick up so he can join my party? Like, I didn't know. And then all of a sudden, he looked like he was from far away in this empty, huge room. He looked like he was far away, and then all of a sudden, it looked like I was brought up really close to him, but then he started to he started morphing where I saw him as Asian for a minute, but then he wasn't Asian. Because at first, when I first saw him, I was really afraid because I didn't know what he was and why did my guides leave me. But he looked like he was Asian, and then I wasn't as scared because then I kind of thought, like maybe he's like other guides that I've met in the past, like being on my journey in the spirit world. But then he started like morphing, and then and this is where I just stood there for a long time and was just staring because I couldn't comprehend what I was seeing because everything became really large. He basically became a giant in front of me. Like, I was seeing him from a distance, and all of a sudden I'm right up next to him, and then boom, he just turns into a giant, and I'm like staring at him, and he's holding his hand out, and I'm standing on his palm. And it was just the weirdest thing because I had never seen anything like that. I didn't know what was going on. Yeah, so that was weird. But basically, when I was finally entering the spirit world, my first duty I had to do was pay my respects to my father. And in essence, he's like Zeus, basically. And I had to go and pay my respects to him that I have reconnected. I'm getting my memories back. I know what I'm supposed to do. That's what it was. And then he gifts me all of these things that I'm supposed to get when I finally reach him. Of course, I got yelled at first, though. I always get yelled at. So I always get yelled at in the spirit world because they're always mad that I took so long to get there. No one's going to become a shaman at 5 years old, okay? So they can't be that harsh on me. But it's funny because I've seen him before. So when I was younger, and this is when I lived in La Crosse, Wisconsin, I remember it was a super sunny, bright day, and we lived in this house that eventually burnt down after we moved out. Anyways, there was a garage that eventually we were knocking down, and we were going to do some new construction on top of that garage, right? But I remember there was a dead car there, and I was hanging out by the car, super sunny day, and I'm by myself. And then all of a sudden, it was like I saw myself, like an outer body experience. I saw myself from above, and I'm looking down, and I'm seeing myself standing there. And then I'm just kind of standing there like, what? But it's just kind of like, it's just an image that's like coming through my head. And a lot of times, especially when I was younger, things that happened to me like that, especially if a ghost was coming to talk to me, you just kind of let it happen because you don't know what's going on. So you don't have a fear. I don't have a fear, and I don't have a sense of questioning it because I was just letting it happen, And so, but anyways, and then I saw him, and he was watching me. So I didn't know what he was. I just probably assumed he was one of the many spirits I always saw. But I've seen him before when I was a kid. So he's actually like been watching me as I've been growing up as a human. And I just never knew it until I finally saw him in the spirit world. They're not like drop dead gorgeous. They are very beautiful. Now, the term like pretty and beautiful, they actually are two very different things to me. So pretty is instant. I'm looking at you and I'm like, oh yeah, you're pretty. And then you just keep going, right? Because there's tons of pretty people. But beautiful, you have an inner light, and you may not be traditional pretty, but there is something just so beautiful about the individual. So there are people who are like that, and that's just kind of what I'm comparing it to. So like it's not like a lustfulness feeling. That's why I'm not saying they're drop dead gorgeous. You know, like 'cause sometimes if people are hearing someone talk about something being attractive, they assume it's going to be something like really sexy or hot or something like that. It's you don't get that feeling at all. It's actually just a beauty that's like standing in front of you. And that is like it evokes a totally different feeling from you when you're seeing something that's beautiful versus something sexy and gorgeous and all that stuff. So I would not say they're like sexy or drop dead gorgeous. Even like gods who are very, very, very attractive, I still would not say that about them. I would just say they're beautiful because I wouldn't feel that sense of attraction to them. Now, even myself, when I go into the spirit world, I actually look different. And the clothes, I was asked about clothes. Y'all have no idea how much clothes I have in the spirit world. So, clothes can have different meanings, okay? Like when I saw my father, he was in armor. He was wearing, it looked like it was just beautiful and rich clothing, but I knew instinctually looking at it, it was armor that he was wearing. Clothes. Everywhere I went in the spirit world and every time I came upon a god, they gave me new clothes. And all of the new clothes can represent it's kind of like your graduation. Like, you know how you wear graduation robes and everything like that? You can be graduating from learning things from a certain god. Like, they're now giving a part of them to you. So now you're donning it and you're wearing it. Other times it can mean levels, that you're being promoted to certain levels. And it can also mean that you're given different and additional abilities. So clothes in general in the spirit world, they all have different meaning. That's how come I mentioned if you ever see a god and what they're wearing, it's going to depend on whatever that god's affinity is. And that's how come the clothes will look different. Not all of them are going to wear the same thing. It's not like togas, you know, like it's not like that. But it is very ornate. Think of Han Dynasty type of clothes. So very ornate. They can be wearing armor. They can be wearing different types of clothes. Just clothes, okay? Now, their personalities. You guys know, like, okay, so I grew up going to church. And when I was in church, how people talked about God was that he was like this all-knowing being, very, very loving, kind of like Santa almost, that kind of feeling that he is this great being and he's very like merciful and all this stuff, right? They're not like that. Sorry. They're actually very strict. They are very, very strict. Everything, basically, there are rules in place. Like, so with all the gods I had mentioned with like Greek mythology, there are different levels of gods. Okay. So like the lower level gods, they cannot just interact and talk to the higher level gods. But the higher level gods are free to interact and talk with the lower level ones. And then only then can the lower level ones actually interact with the higher level ones. And everything is about formality. So they are very strict and they can help. Don't get me wrong. But they're not like, come to me, child. I'll just take you into my bosoms. They're not like that. Okay. Like, so they are very, very strict. They all have different personalities though. And I think it really depends on the god. Because it depends on what their affinity is. Because imagine that you're around a god who does nothing but destroy. And then you're around a god who is like Gayeng, who is like motherly and brings children to people. They're going to act very differently between each other. But even then, Gayeng, who I actually know, she is not, like, she rages, okay? Like, she is not, you know, like, I don't want you to have a fairy tale idea of them, because that's not what they are. They are not like pure evil either. They're just like, we'll just move on so you guys can kind of understand. So, and there's a reason for that. It's all because of the rules, okay? So like for myself, growing up, and I actually have my memories and everything of when I was in the spirit world. So, gods have children, all right? Now, there are a lot of gods. However, each pair or each god can have thousands of children. Thousands. Now, out of those thousands, only a few, less than 5, you guys, are chosen to be high-level gods. Now, of course, that's only if you are one of the top 3 levels of gods, are you considered a top-level god. And then the rest are all like, they're not like lower-level gods, but that's what they're considered if you are a higher-level god. So anyways, out of that 3 row that I had mentioned, they will all have children, but only a few of their own children will actually be chosen as a higher level god. Now, this will typically depend on the order the child was born, and then also if there is like a sign from the heavens, or if the child has an affinity to something, because all of them are born with certain gifts, certain things that they're really good at. So if it's something of a very high nature, then they are raised and are a high level god. So I was not allowed to play with other children. I had a lot of siblings, but I'm not allowed to play with them. Even if I had another sibling and we both became high-level gods, we don't interact with each other. They keep us separated, because what they do is they teach us the entire time. You're just being taught the entire time of how you're supposed to be, what your job and your role is, and that's it. You don't like hang out with them. So, and then, and you are spoiled, don't get me wrong. You get a lot of gifts, you get a lot of things, but because you don't have like a peer system, you don't have anybody to show these new items that you got, right? And that is to prevent you from having that competitiveness, and so that you don't feel that sense of greed, like, oh, I need to do better than the other god, like, because they keep you separated. They don't just throw you all in a pen of baby high-level gods. Like, that's not how it works. And then even as an adult, the same rule applies. How I told you guys, the lower levels don't just interact with the higher levels, and the higher levels typically are too busy to just hang out with anybody. So it's all meant to keep things fair. So even if you are considered a high-level god, you don't just go around bullying people. Like, it's not like that, because you are separated from them. They may see you, especially as you're passing and you're going and you're doing your work, but they cannot interact with you unless you interact with them. And you already know you're not supposed to. So unless it's like a business need, but that's how it is. So knowing that now, imagine how that individual will be as a god if you came up to them. It's almost like an indifference. They will feel this indifference because they are taught what they are supposed to do, and that is what they're supposed to do. So that is what I meant by they're not like loving and all full of understanding, okay? And gods don't do human bidding. So, I was asked, like, humans, they want to know gods so that they can worship them. Gods are not allowed to have worshipers. They are allowed to have disciples. Worshipers causes greed in the heavens, and that's why they're not allowed to have worshipers. Humans have free will, though. If they choose to worship a god, that's perfectly fine. But, it's not like a guaranteed pass into heaven because you worshiped a god. So they have disciples. Now, disciples, though, it's typically individuals who have a certain gift. So remember all those thousands of children I had mentioned? What happens to the rest of them then, right? Because they're all considered gods. They're actually, I would call them a deity. So I would only refer to someone as a god if they are of a high-level god. Anybody underneath them, which I would consider a disciple of that god, they are considered deities to me. So even if it's another sibling of mine, but they were not chosen as a high level god, I would just refer to them as a deity versus an actual god. So they would refer to me as a god, though. They can't call me a deity because I was a high level god. And that's how it works. Did that make any sense? See, I told you, everything is about formality. Now, about the whole thing with disciples. Now, they will have affinities to the god that they follow. And through the teachings and followings of their god, then they can be promoted. So you can be promoted if you do great things and great work for your God. And then your God will choose to promote you. And then that's how you can raise ranks. So that is what's going to happen to all of the other siblings. They will, because the siblings, the children of gods, they are given gifts as well. All right. But then they will never be at the level of a high level god. But they are still considered a god though. So they are higher than dragons. And they are higher than disciples who are not gods. So, but they're not considered like the god. Like if I talked about like God of Lightning, right? His disciples, even if they are the children of gods, they would not be like referred to as the God of Lightning. I hope I'm making sense. And really, gods are not worshipped because there's a reason for it. Gods. Why do you turn to a god? Think about it. We turn to gods when we need advice, guidance, help. That is when you turn to a god. And I think to some people, they may see worshiping them as being a disciple in a way, but they're not aware that they're trying to be a disciple versus a worshiper. Worshipping to me means you're enslaved to that God, which you're not because you have free will. The gods all give us free will as humans. So you are not a worshiper of that God. And honestly, worshipers are just the slaves to gods. So that's why we don't have shrines. Like even shamans, we don't have shrines to gods, like to the God. Because then that would be us worshiping that God. And we're cleaning the God's house and all that stuff. We are not worshipers of gods. We pray on them for help, assistance, and guidance and all that stuff. And we try to follow in their footsteps and their teachings. But that is a definition of a disciple. That is not a worshiper. So if you find that you have an affinity to a certain God, or maybe you keep seeing an image, or you keep feeling like when you come across text and you keep seeing this one particular God and it just strikes you, you may end up having to become a disciple of that God, but you're not a worshiper of them. Now, for anybody wondering about my disciples, it's kind of hard to become one of my disciples. So I'm not like Lucifer, you guys, but it's it's kind of like that. Okay, it's hard to become one of my disciples. Typically, you can only become one of my disciples if it's through marriage. Or you were born into it. That's it. Because it is such a specific affinity, a lot of people don't have it. So you can't be like, and my disciples, they have a certain ability that normal people can't just learn. Oh my God, it's so hard to explain it without just saying who I am. But, okay, I'm just gonna say it because this story won't make any sense. It's just gonna sound really weird. I am the god of dragons. And so to become my disciple, you have to be a dragon. That's the only way you can become my disciple. The other way I mentioned is through marriage. So if a dragon took you as a wife or a husband, then you may become one of my disciples. The god of dragon, So, you know how I did that whole video about dragons? All dragons, even those in this plane of existence, they refer to me as their mother because they know who I am. They recognize me and they have a fear of me because they don't know exactly what I'm going to do to them. I'm not going to do anything to them. They're very lucky though. Like, I'm actually a really, I'm a very playful individual. Okay. And the reason for this, you guys, is because I was super lonely. So, you know how I mentioned high level gods, blah, blah, blah. We're not allowed to hang out and be around other people. That's all I wanted to do because I'm a very curious person and I was granted a lot of knowledge and a lot of power. And I just wanted to play because only when I had to do something. And if you're wondering, what does the God of protect all of heaven? We go to war if we have to. And so we have a lot of killing abilities. So people feared me because they knew who I was and that I controlled the dragons. And so now y'all know. That's why I'm super scaly, you guys. I'm like part lizard, I'm telling you. I'm like, I put lotion on like 5 times a day at work, and this is some thick first aid lotion, and my hands are still super, super dry. You guys probably can't really see it that well here. Let's just try and do a close-up here. But anyways, literally, like, my skin will bleed from how dry I am. So anyways, yeah. So I am the god of dragons. And because of that, a lot of gods, they will come to me and ask to try and get a dragon. And then I watch and I control all the lands of all the dragons being born. I watch all the dragons as they are older, and then I decide where they're going to go. So, yeah. So now, when I was younger, because I wasn't allowed to play with anybody, I did what all people would do. I ran away. I have a lot of places, property, you may call it, worlds, basically. I have a lot of them, but I didn't want to play on any of the ones I had because I've already played on it. So I would go to other gods. I would go to other gods and their world, I would go and play there. And I have this thing for forests and jungles, and I have this thing for water. I'm always playing there. But the funny thing is, my father would come looking for me. My father would send people to come look for me. And I would never, ever go to the god that I am playing in their world. I would never go to them until I leave. But the gods knew I was there. So then the people will come looking for me and ask if they've seen me. Technically, they hadn't seen me, but they know I'm there. So they would say, no, we haven't seen her. But they know I'm there. And the thing is, they know what I'm doing. They know I'm just there to play, and that's it. Like, I'm not going to hurt anybody. I'm not there to do anything like that. And they know who I am, so it's not like I'm going to get in trouble. So that I would just play, and then when I'm done playing, I would go up to them and hang out with them for a little bit. I would just chit-chat with them. I do that still. I do that still. I realized, like, if a god is wearing something really ornate on them, I'll just reach and grab it. And I'm like, what is this? And I'm just like holding it and touching it. That is not allowed at all. You're not allowed to just do that to gods. But I'm a curious person. And they know my intent because, again, we're like, being the god of dragons, you're not supposed to be evil. And so it's just, they just knew I was always curious and I just did things. It's really funny because there was this one time when I went to Spirit World and I was being taught by the god of death. And he was sitting there and he was talking to me and what happens is when they're teaching me, they're trying to help me remember. And then as I'm looking at him, I see memories of me and him together, like when I was younger and when I was in the spirit world. And he had this really ornate piece of jewelry. And inside of the jewelry, there was actually a world of his inside of it. And I remember I was looking at him, and then boom, I just go up there and I'm just grabbing it. I'm like touching it. And he just stood there, like, he just let me doing it. It didn't even bother him. It didn't even faze him. Like, but you're not supposed to do that. But I was very, very spoiled in the spirit world. I was very, very spoiled. And we're going to move into the next part about God's being reborn and why. And then you guys will find out how I got to come back. Oh, and then before we move into that part, I just want to tell you guys, one time I came across this really, really strong demon. It was the weirdest thing. And I remember the demon was looking at me, and then all of a sudden it went up to me and it smelled me. And it knew that I was the god of dragons. And it said it to me. And when it said it to me, I was like I got scared. Like, how did you know? Like, a lot of people just don't know that about me. And like, especially just like meeting me and talking to me and everything like that, they don't know that about me. So the fact that this demon just smelled me and it said that I smelled like dragons, that was just weird. I don't even know what dragons smell like. Okay, so why are gods born as humans? There's only 2 reasons. So the first one, you're being punished. Typically when a god is being punished, so what a lot of people don't know, in the heavens we do go to war a lot. There are a lot of wars between gods. Typically what happens is these are lower level gods who will get into war, who go into war. And then what happens is finally the higher level gods, a council is called, and then everybody gets punished. Everybody involved. We're not going to take sides. We're punishing everybody. So gods do get reborn as humans for punishment. Typically what happens, the individual gets born into a really bad life. Born into poverty. They're born during a time of war. Now the problem with that though is because they were still a god. So when it is an individual who is being reborn and they were a god, they tend to be able to get themselves out of the situation that they were born into. They work very, very hard for it though. Some will die in this lifetime trying to achieve it, but typically it's because it's a punishment. They're not going to be given a position of high power. They're not going to be given a plush life. They're not going to be given good luck. And what happens though is that these individuals, their memory is taken away of who they were, and they're not meant to relearn as a human that they were a god being reborn, because it's a punishment. Now typically though, they'll be very narcissistic people, and they will always feel that they are better than everybody around them, and they will never be happy with what they have. They will also struggle with learning to love other people, because what I found, lower level gods, there's greed, because you can get promoted. And when you are a lower level god, they want to get promoted. Promotions is what they work for, because they cannot become a high level god. But only through promotions will they feel that they have achieved greater things in their life because of that. I mean, imagine if you were a child of a god, but just because you weren't chosen to be a high level god and you were made to be a deity of some other god, some people don't take likely to that. So they find out through promotions they'll get more power, and then with more power they end up becoming kind of bad, because gods have free will. They can choose to be bad. It's not evil. I can't even say the term evil, but they go against what they know they should not be doing, and they're doing it on purpose. And they'll go as far as they can until they're caught. Normally, the god that they're a deity to will actually catch them before it gets to the council. When it gets to the council, that's when all the gods are looking at everybody's disciple, and everybody's going to get in trouble. Because imagine if I'm finding out all of these other gods who are my peers, their disciples, they're not watching their disciples well, I will come and punish your disciples then. But imagine if it was also my disciples, like, Lord, Now remember, my disciples are the dragons. They can't get in trouble. That's the best part. Because they're really like kind of bratty like me. We basically know how to get out of things. Now, of course, these gods who are being punished, though, once their life has passed, the heavens will assess them. Basically, have they become humbled enough that they can be placed again in a position and they will not have the same power they did before? Of course, it'll all be stripped of them, but are they good enough where they're not going to go through another cycle? Are they going to, because if they want to get punished again, the heavens will send them back again and to live another terrible life. So there's that. And I actually know particularly of a god who is being punished. This individual was given a lot of power because they proved they were good at it, at what they did. And it's kind of like somebody who was really good at killing things, but they would take it to the extreme. And then they relished too much in the killing. And finally, they did something to another god. And that's how they got punished. And, the individual is ridiculous. They're learning, though. They are learning. And that is the entire point of why they are born as human, to be punished. But they won't ever get the memories, though, of them being a god. Which is going to lead me to the next part. People like me. Typically gods who are being reincarnated and you are not being punished, it's because you have a task. You're given something you're supposed to do. Sometimes disciples will do this so that they get promoted. However, if you fail, you're not going to get promoted. Now, I know what my duty and my task is, and typically people who are like me, because there's more than just me, you guys. I'm not the only one. I ain't that special. All right. So other ones who are like me, you will regain your knowledge. You will regain the information. And you will learn and know a lot of stuff. You will be given a lot of abilities again. And it's meant to prepare you to do and complete your task. And that's it. I had to beg to get born. Now, I've only been here, this is my third lifetime as a human. My first one that I remember very, very vividly, because I always have memories of it, I was actually alive during the Han Dynasty. And I was not an emperor or an empress. You guys, gods who are being reborn and you have a task, they do not place you in a high-level position because you're not, that can fester greed because you might like it too much as a human, having that much control and power. So, because it's unfair. You have this advanced knowledge. It's unfair to others, so. You may be placed into management, though, if you go to work. So, and you will generally be luckier in life. You just will, and you will have supernatural abilities. And keeping that in mind, it is all meant for you to complete your task. Okay? So, I was also asked, why are gods not common knowledge? And that depends on your level. I know I've told you guys before, I hate talking about the levels, but honestly, that's the reason why. It's because of your levels. When you are only of a certain level, only certain information is granted to you, and you can only go to certain areas. So a lot of people can't reach certain parts of the world, in the spirit world, because of your level. And that's just the way it is. You can become promoted through your work, especially if you are somebody who follows a certain god and that is your affinity. Yes, you can be promoted, but promotions are hard. You guys don't think that it's handed out like candy. But that's why people work so hard, is to get their promotion. And it's not always agreed upon. I'm just saying. Oh, but anyways, I was granted to come. My father didn't want me to come. I know. You didn't want me to come. He told me. That was the first thing he told me. So So he was like granting me all of this stuff, and he was like, no, I didn't want you to go. And the reason for that is because I have a playful nature, and I was spoiled. I don't like being told what to do, and I don't listen to people. So, yes, but my mother actually was promoting me to get reborn, and that's how I got to come. I begged really hard to go. And to me, you guys, okay, and this is why my dad didn't want me to be reborn, because I enjoy it too much. I enjoy living this carefree kind of life. Like, and this is exactly why he didn't want me to come. But you know what, Dad? I'm doing it. Okay, I'm doing what you told me to do. So I'm done. I'm done. Our deal is good. And now, a really big reason why gods are not general knowledge, it's because they don't do human bidding. You know, I've told you guys, you can pray to them, and ask for guidance and assistance, but they may not always answer. They don't need to answer to you. So keep that in mind. All right, so then this is going to bring us to the end of the video, which is going to talk about, then what are shamans? So in case you guys haven't figured it out yet, shamans are actually the disciples of gods. And this does not apply just to Hmong people, you guys, just so you were clear. It applies to anybody who has supernatural abilities. You are actually considered a disciple. Now, if you are not a god being reborn for a specific task that you are supposed to complete in this lifetime, then you are considered a disciple. And you will find you have certain abilities that are better than others, and there's a reason for that. Now, you need to find out which god it belongs to, though, and typically the information will become clear to you. Now, everybody will call their god by something different. So even if everybody refers to the god of lightning, and god of lightning, I don't know if I told you guys this, but he is a very common god that a lot of people talk about, but he is typically called upon to kill and destroy demons and stuff. And ghosts and all that stuff are very, very afraid of him because of his power. So if you are a person who has an affinity to lightning, and you are very good at killing things, then you're probably a disciple of the god of lightning. You may even be so far as a child of the god of lightning, because the children of that god can also be their disciple too. So this is the long video of gods. So now that you guys are kind of getting an understanding of how things work, I know people want me to do like individual things about gods, okay? I can't, because there's a lot of knowledge I can't share with you guys, because it's not allowed, because you guys aren't supposed to know it unless you find out about it on your own. So if you are ever really, really needing a specific god's guidance, pray upon that god. Even if you don't know who it is, but you know what you're trying to achieve. Like if you're trying to have children, you're not going to call to the god of lightning, okay? So, now, don't get me wrong. The god of lightning, their disciples may call on other gods for assistance. Same thing with shamans. Shamans may call on other gods for assistance, right? Even if they are not the direct disciple of a specific god. But what I'm saying is, if you really want like longevity or something, a better health, a better life or something, pray out and try to seek and direct your message to whoever god that could be, even if you don't know it. So that is your way of trying to send the message correctly. And some people will get answers. Some people will get clear signs. But again, they're not somebody to really worship, because you are not a slave to that god. But you are definitely allowed to follow in their footsteps, try and become their disciple. All right? So that concludes this video. It was very, very long. So I'm going to have to edit this whole thing down. It's like an hour long. So that's about it, you guys. Thanks for watching.